My name is Sandra O'Connor, and I'd like to welcome you to the rezoning request for the City of Greensboro. Each commissioner normally visits each site prior to the meeting. The procedure used at all public hearings is as follows. Planning staff presents background information and makes a recommendation. An applicant will present a short summary on how he or she communicated with the neighborhood and why the request is reasonable. Other persons in favor of the request will speak. A total of 10 minutes is shared with the applicant. Speakers opposed to the request share another 10 minutes of speaking time. Those in favor of the request share 5 minutes of rebuttal time. Those in opposition to the request will share 5 minutes of rebuttal time. Any commission member may ask questions once a presenter has completed their presentation. All commissioners are required to vote unless they have a conflict of interest. In an effort to run meetings more efficiently, the Planning and Zoning Commission may reorganize the meeting agenda. Cases in which no opposition has been expressed to the Planning Department and in which Commission members do not feel necessitate in-depth discussion will be moved to the top of the agenda. Staff will provide a shortened presentation for these expedited cases, and applicants have up to 2 minutes to address the Commission if they desire to provide any additional information they want the Commission to know. Expedited cases will then follow the procedures outlined previously. All denied cases and all approved ordinances receiving 6 or more favorable votes will constitute final action unless an appeal is submitted in writing to the Planning Department and the appeal fee is paid within 10 days. All denied cases and all ordinances receiving a majority of favorable votes, but less than 6, will be subject to a public hearing by the City Council. Speakers from the floor wishing to comment on the proposed text amendment will have 3 minutes to address the Commission. When a case is called that you are interested in, people wishing to speak online will need to use the raise hand function, and you will be called upon to speak in the order in which hands were raised. Please find the raise hand function under the reaction button. People wishing to speak in person will need to come to the podium. When you are called upon to speak, please state your name and address for the record. Please also direct all comments and questions to the Zoning Commission. Participants in the Zoom meeting will be able to view the meeting and speak when they are called upon. This meeting is being recorded and televised on the Greensboro Television Network. In addition, the telecast is being closed captioned for the hearing impaired. Before we proceed, I'll have the members of the Commission introduce themselves. We have 2 members online this evening. We'll start with those in chambers at my far right. Please introduce yourselves.
Warshay Downing.
Keith Peterson.
Catherine Magid.
Mary Skeens.
Erica Glass.
Paul Gilbert Sr.
And online,
Andrew Egbert.
thank you, Mr. Egbert. And do we have Mr. Engel online?
We do. It almost sounds like we're listening to a recording of a radio broadcast, though. I don't know if somebody can fix the audio or if it's just me, but that'd be helpful.
Okay. They're working on it. Thank you for bringing that up. We also will hear a few words from our staff attorney.
Thank you, Chair O'Connor, and good evening, everyone. Much of the Planning and Zoning Commission's work relates to the consideration of rezoning applications. I'd like to remind everyone in attendance that when the Commission considers rezoning applications, its determinations are based on the land uses that are allowed under the zoning district that's put forth in the application, and any conditions that have been proposed by the applicant as well. Land use impacts on public infrastructure are relevant in rezoning matters, and it's important to know that the Commission is not here to determine all details of a development. This involves staff input and evaluation that goes beyond the scope of the Commission's work. If a rezoning would generate a certain amount of traffic flow, the commissioners will have been provided with a summary traffic impact study. Meanwhile, many site-specific development features, such as the management of stormwater, are evaluated through the Technical Review Committee rather than in this forum this evening. Lastly, concerns that are not related to land use are not germane to the Commission's consideration of rezoning applications. For example, generalized concerns about crime rates, current or anticipated school capacity, and questions of who may own or live at a subject property are not for the Commission's consideration. If there are questions about matters that are not addressed this evening, those may be referred to the Planning Department or the Technical Review Committee as appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. We have no absences this evening. We need a motion to approve the minutes from February 19th.
Catherine Magid, so called.
Commissioner Gilmer, second.
Thank you, Ms. Magid and Mr. Gilmer. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? The minutes are approved. Do we have any withdrawals or continuances?
We do not.
All right, and then we described earlier our accelerated agenda, and it appears, and I would like to confirm, that there is no one here to speak in opposition to item PLP 2409 and Z 2403001, which is an annexation request and rezoning for High Cone Road. I want to make sure there's no one here or online that wants to speak in opposition.
Sorry, having a little technical issue here. We're trying to sort.
So we will have,
Asking again, yes, if there's any opposition to that request.
pardon,
I said yes. We're asking again if there's any opposition to that request.
yeah, any opposition? Seeing none, we'll have the brief presentation then for item PLP 2409 Z 2403001, an annexation original zoning request from County AG Agricultural to City R3 Residential Single Family 3 for the property identified as 4629 High Cone Road and a portion of the High Cone Road right-of-way, generally described as north of High Cone Road and east of Pierview Drive, 1.03 acres. Mr.
Thank
Carter.
you, Chair. This is the subject property, and the zoning map for that property shows that it is currently zoned County Ag. You'll notice to the west and the north is zoned CZ County CZRS3, and to the east is County PI, which is public and institutional, and south is City CM. The subject property currently contains a fire station with single-family dwellings to the west and the north, a religious assembly use to the east, and a retail use to the south. In recommending approval of this request, staff notes that the GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan designates this site as urban general and within a neighborhood scale activity center on the future built form map. The GSO 2040 Comprehensive Plan also designates this site as commercial on the future land use map. The proposed original zoning request supports both the comprehensive plans filling in our framework strategy to invest in building and maintaining quality, accessible public recreation centers, libraries, neighborhood park facilities, and other services to sustain livable neighborhoods, and the big idea to arrange our land uses for where we live, work, attend school, shop, and enjoy our free time to create a more vibrant and livable Greensboro. The proposed R3 zoning district is primarily intended to accommodate low-density, single-family detached residential development up to 3 dwelling units per acre. However, in the R3 zoning district, Certain governmental uses, such as the existing fire station, are also permitted in the district, and they are complementary to uses in that surrounding area. And with that, I can answer any questions that you have. There are no conditions proposed for this request.
Thank you. Do we have any questions? We have no questions. Does the applicant want to add anything for up to 2 minutes to the application? If you'd come to the podium, please. You'd give your name and address, please.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Brent Severs. I'm with FEI, address 8518 Triad Drive in Colfax. We're doing the engineering for the project, and I'm really here just to field any questions you guys may have.
Thank you. Do we have any questions for the engineer or anything else? We have none. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Seeing no other comments in favor of the application, we will close the public hearing. And I'll look for 2 motions, one for annexation and then one on zoning.
I move that we annex PLP 24-09.
Thank you, Ms.
Commissioner
Magid.
Peterson, second.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. We have a motion, a second for the annexation. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone opposed? None. All right, and then we need a motion on the zoning, please.
This is Catherine Magid. Z 24-03-001. The Greensboro Planning and Zoning Commission believes that its actions to recommend approval of the original zoning request for the property at 4629 High Cone Road and a portion of High Cone Road right-of-way from County AG Agricultural to City R3 Residential Single Family 3 to be consistent with the adopted Greensboro 2040 Comprehensive Plan and considers the action taken to be reasonable and in the public interest for the following reasons. The request is consistent with the Comprehensive Plan's future build form map and future land use map. The proposed CR3 zoning district permits uses that fits the context of the surrounding area and limits negative impact on the adjacent properties. The request is reasonable due to the size, physical conditions, and other attributes of the area. It will benefit the property owner and the surrounding community, and approval is in the public interest.
Thank you, Ms. Magid and Mr. Peterson. Any further comment? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? None. This constitutes a favorable recommendation and is subject to a public hearing at the Tuesday, April 16th, 2024 City Council meeting. In a most unusual circumstance, those are all the items we have regarding zoning items. We are scheduled and will have a public hearing this evening on accessory dwelling units, and we will also have an update on the Greensboro 2040 Comprehensive Plan. So we will proceed now to the proposed text amendments. Who's going to make the presentation? Also, if you want to speak, you will be limited to 3 minutes if you speak for or against this. Thank you.
Well, good evening, Madam Chair and members of the Commission. My name is Chris Andrews. I serve as the department's the Planning Department's Land Development Division Manager, and it's an honor to be here before you. This is my first appearance before you. I began work in May of last year, so this is the first text amendment that I've been able to bring for the department, and I look forward to hopefully many more presentations as we work on the Land Development Ordinance. But item E1 is a text amendment that's related to the standards for accessory dwelling units within the city. And a memo from staff, as well as a copy of the proposed amendment, are within your packet tonight for consideration. So I want to start out with kind of a background presentation of what staff, the work that staff has done, and just give you some context technically about what this amendment is all about. So first of all, just setting the context of what is an accessory dwelling unit.
Mr. Andrews?
Yes.
Are you presenting something?
I am, yes. Oh, it says
I
the
can't
screen
see it.
sharing is paused. Let's see. Sorry about that. We'll figure this out here. Oh, resume share, perhaps. There we go. Although it's sharing the wrong presentation. Okay. And we'll go. All right. Are we able to see that now?
Yep. Good to go.
Terrific. Okay, thank you. All right, so to give some background, accessory dwelling units, these are dwelling units that are defined both within the land development ordinance as well as just in general context. And so these are secondary and incidental to a principal use on the property, in this case, a single-family dwelling. So there's lots of benefits, allows people to age in place. There's just the variety of housing that they afford. It could be income generation for property owners. There's this idea of gentle density where you're increasing the amount of density or people that can live within a certain area, but largely they're imperceptible. And this allows incremental development to happen over time. So AARP is a group that does a lot of advocacy about accessory dwelling units. So this is one of their graphics, but it kind of shows an ADU could be attached, detached, in a basement, above a garage. Maybe you convert a garage. So there are many different forms, and this amendment would address all of these. Visually, they could look like any of these, standalone, above a garage, or an attachment or expansion to a home. And so, why the discussion about accessory dwelling units? This stemmed from council's priorities of having an abundance of attainable housing, as well as a policy initiative that was from 2023, talking about this priority of attainable housing. And then it continues further in that it supports the adopted policy guidance that the city has, both in the comprehensive plan as well as other departments' plans like housing GSO. And then it's also just wise for municipalities to continue to have routine maintenance of their land development ordinance. If you recognize that something is maybe not working or there's lots of inquiries about it, that's time to kind of do a tune-up. So there's been lots of variances and other things at the Board of Adjustment that have been granted and considered due to the standards, and so we thought it's probably time to look at those. This is just a quick graphic from a design firm called Opticos. This is the missing middle housing. This is kind of depicts the continuum from detached single-family homes to mid-rise apartments and everything in between. And so, again, that kind of imperceptible gentle density ADUs can contribute to that. And really the goal here is just providing more housing options in Greensboro. So who might live in an ADU? Well, Arthur Fonzarelli lived in an ADU when Happy Days started. The Cunninghams were gracious enough to allow him to be there. If you watch Full House, Uncle Joey and then Uncle Jesse and Aunt Becky lived in ADUs. I don't know how they got the piano up there, but if you've seen that house that it's modeled after, that'd be tough. And then Will and Carlton in Fresh Prince got sent out to the pool house. So these are just kind of fun fictional examples, but really shows that this idea of having another dwelling on a that's accessory to a principal dwelling we've seen these over time. I do want to take a moment to just provide some clarity as we've gone through kind of a public process and had a couple groups help us refine these amendments. These were some of the questions that came up. So with this amendment, this is not proposing a new use. ADUs are permitted in all single-family residential zoning districts within Greensboro right now, have been for quite some time. So there's no new use that's being proposed with these amendments. There wouldn't be a new building permit process. ADUs require a residential building permit, and so there wouldn't be an additional ADU permit. So we're not adding any sort of permitting layers to this. ADUs are not proposed to be built by the city, at least in connection with this amendment. There may be other departments that do that sort of work, but the text amendments that you'll be considering tonight are not trying to get the city to build more of these. We had questions about taxation. There is not a direct tie to taxation, but we with any improvement of property, that could change the value of property, so we want property owners to be cognizant of that. And finally, this is not a direct tie to short-term rentals, even though folks have raised issues or questions to say, well, could these be used as short-term rentals? Possibly, but any use of those would have to go through the short-term rental standards that were approved last year by City Council. So this isn't a direct tie to those. But what we are proposing to amend are the dimensional standards. So we're talking about the built form of a structure, the parking requirements, and then size and ownership standards primarily. So what has staff done? We looked at the city's previous unified development ordinance. We looked at our current land development ordinance. We looked at other North Carolina jurisdictions as well as those within the triad. Staff had their own perspectives and goals and recommendations. We had to identify other areas of the ordinance that might need to be amended. And then we also considered something that's really popular right now, our pre-approved plan sets. So having a pre-approved, a la carte options for dwelling units. That is not something that we're proposing here, but it is something that helps shape the context of our amendments. So we have some challenges that we identified with the existing ordinance. There's an occupancy requirement in the ordinance right now that requires an owner to live within the ADU or a principal dwelling. That raises a lot of issues for enforcement and just kind of legally. Some of the dimensional requirements for an ADU, especially a detached ADU, the ordinance kind of speaks to dimensional standards based on who's within that structure. So whether your car or whether your pottery barn lives in there, or whether a relative lives in there, those kind of had different dimensional standards. We looked at the minimum square footage of a dwelling unit, things like appearance. The ordinance right now requires the ADU to maintain a single family appearance. That is a very difficult term to enforce and may differ amongst people. And then a question about parking. Providing additional parking spaces, the material that goes with it, the land preparation that could go with it, that's another added barrier. We have some challenges just in the idea about accessory dwelling units. This, you're adding more building area or more people within a neighborhood could evoke some concerns. So this idea about gentle density, and then just the design and permit process. It can be a lot to go to the Board of Adjustment or go, find an architect and find a surveyor. All of those things could make the process very difficult. This is an example of kind of what are out there for not pre-approved plans, but kind of shows you some design work that can be done regarding ADUs. Have some previous connections to the city of Houston, and they had a kind of a design contest amongst design professionals in the city to show what ADUs can look like. What's their relationship between a home and the street, alleys, all of those things are part of the built environment that they wanted to consider. And then on the kind of further down the line, you have a county like San Diego County where they have an actual pre-approved plan that has structural drawings, electrical drawings, all of that as part of a permit submittal. So it really cuts some of the red tape, so to speak. But that just for your consideration. And as part of the city's pro-housing grant that the commission may have heard about, we wanted to hopefully be able to do some form of that. So staff has kind of kept that as a bookmark in our minds. And as part of this regulatory framework, that last item there, strategic amendments to our land development ordinance that would allow that to happen. So staff did some analysis about ADUs in the city already, and we had 38 known or permitted ADUs in the city. We know there's probably a lot more. The median size, we looked at whether they're attached or detached. Most of them are detached. But this is one of the points that kind of drives things home, that nearly half of the known ADUs required some sort of Board of Adjustment decision. So that's time and money that would precede a building permit for an accessory dwelling unit. And we looked at that relationship of the size of the accessory dwelling to the principal structure. So this is kind of a visual of where those ADUs are at, the ones that we know and have been permitted. Those are kind of the distribution throughout the city. And so to give some background, staff hosted an ADU webpage. I had a link to some of the past presentations that were conducted, a link to the proposed ordinance, and then we've had an ADU survey for the last month or so, and we've got about over 200 responses. So that kind of affirmed some of the things that we were proposing, and as well as just gave us context for what some of the concerns might still be regarding ADUs. So as part of that background, we had both a technical group, focus group, as well as a community focus group. And so in that technical group, we had surveyors, architects, developers, land use attorneys, people who have built and designed ADUs. And then as part of the community focus group, there were a group of council member appointed community leaders that helped us kind of round out some of those concerns and thoughts about ADUs and how they might relate to a neighborhood. So out of those meetings, we kind of came up with some, staff kind of did an analysis, and these were some of the amendment suggestions that came from those. Addressing the ownership requirement, and the consensus there was to eliminate that. There was a question of, do we want to allow more than one ADU per lot, and how does that work? There was consensus that the amount of square footage could be raised. This question about setbacks, about how we treat an ADU versus just an accessory structure like a detached garage. And then the relationship to a principal structure, this idea of single-family appearance, that was something that people wrestled with and would be hard to describe. There was consensus that the off-street parking requirement could be eliminated, and then there was support of the city providing some of these pre-approved or pre-reviewed plans, especially related to prefabricated buildings and things like that. So this began in June 2023. We had the meetings with technical stakeholders in August of 2023, and then the community stakeholders in October of 2023. And then staff hosted two virtual open houses in January of 2024. And as I mentioned, that survey had been part of the process as well. So in summary, these are kind of the takeaways of the amendments in that staff wanted to have an amendment that would allow ADUs to meet the standards of accessory buildings, not necessarily principal buildings. That we would no longer require an owner to live within the ADU or the primary dwelling. That an ADU's size could be increased to 50% of the primary dwelling. That no additional parking space would be required. And then that the single-family appearance requirement would no longer be a standard. So visually, this might help a little bit to kind of compare. You think, well, does it really matter all that much how a setback is treated? And in residential districts, you may have a side or a rear setback that, like for example, in R3, a 30-foot rear setback where you might otherwise have a detached garage or something like that can really eliminate a lot of the usable area for a accessory building. So the accessory dwelling unit could be subject to a 30-foot setback, whereas an accessory structure, again like a detached garage, would be allowed to be built at 3 feet. So this idea of what was occupying the structure was a sticking point with a lot of the analysis. So so these amendments would propose that the ADUs would be treated just like accessory structures. This is a graphic in the ordinance that is proposed to be amended to show that an attached accessory dwelling unit would be able to be 50% of the heated floor area of the principal building. So just visually kind of getting an idea of what that looks like. I want to kind of close here in saying that before the City Council can consider any proposed text amendment, the Planning and Zoning Commission must provide a recommendation. And again, that draft amendment is attached for your review and consideration within your packet. And so staff would like to offer that these amendments make the land development ordinance more user-friendly and flexible and supportive of the city's adopted plans, such as GSO 2040 and Housing GSO, and in providing access to a variety of housing types. And furthermore, the proposed amendments to the accessory dwelling unit standards are reasonable and in the public interest, and that they provide necessary changes related to the enforceability of standards and allow for more flexible placement of dwelling units within the city. So with that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to answer any other questions of the Commission or those who are wishing to speak tonight.
I think that there are a number of questions. We'll start on my right. Do you have any, Mr. Downing? All right. Mr. Peterson?
Yes. I got a question on his ADUs.
Certainly.
Can these ADUs, can the primary owner turn that ADU into a rental parcel?
Not a parcel. If the owner wanted to rent out an ADU, they could certainly do that. Whether it's a long-term thing, a college student, something like that, or if it were short-term rental, they would need to adhere to the short-term rental policies of the city.
Okay. Thank you. You hear me now? Good. Second question is, what will stop a shade tree carpenter from building an ADU in his backyard?
It's a great question. I think I'd offer right now that ADUs are permitted in every zoning district, so you would need a building permit now. So there's nothing necessarily changing about the city requiring a permit to build an ADU. So yeah, at that point it would be a matter of enforcement for the city.
Thank you. Ms. Gaines?
A couple of questions. First of all, what's the difference between floor area and building coverage? They seem to be used interchangeably here. Am I reading that incorrectly?
No. Floor area would be of the it could be combined. So if you have a structure that's 2 stories, that floor area is combined versus the building coverage would just be the kind of aerial view of a structure. So you could have increased floor area for a structure as you add floors to it, versus if you had a bird's eye view of that structure, it would still be covering the same amount of land, if that makes sense.
And I'll just add to that, the floor area is getting to that relationship between the accessory dwelling unit and the principal structure. That's that relationship, trying to figure that out. Building coverage is all of the structures on the property. So there may be an ADU as well as a garage and other things on there. So the building coverage is trying to account for all of the structures on the property. The relationship of
I can't hear anything that Mike is saying.
Is it not coming on?
I keep getting texts from Zach. He says it sounds like the teacher on Charlie Brown.
Okay.
So if staff's going to answer questions, can they go to the podium or?
Yeah, can you hear that any better, Mr. Engel?
No.
I can hear it in here.
I can hear that you're trying to say something, but you talk very
trust
low,
me,
Mike, and I'm not trying to say it as a criticism. You just tend to talk very low, and it's not a good night for that, unfortunately.
Not tonight. All right. Is that any better?
Is that better?
No? Okay, I'll go to the podium. All right, one more time. Is that any better?
Can you hear it better?
Much better.
Okay, all right, we'll go from that one. I don't know what the issue is with the other microphones. I apologize. All I was saying is that trying to get to Ms. Skeen's question was that the square footage question is really kind of that relationship between the living space, so the accessory dwelling unit to the principal building, and the building coverage typically is we've got to account for all of the structures on the property. So you may have accessory dwelling unit, you may have a garage, a shed, those other things on there. That's why the two terms are in there. They're trying to get to different questions. You may have the same thing. The accessory dwelling unit is the only accessory structure on the property, but that's not always the case. That's all I was saying.
Well, I'm looking, and help me through this here. In 11.1, under size and proportion, you're speaking to 30% of the principal. It may not exceed 30%, and it goes into gross sales. Now, that's a little arbitrary. Mm-hmm. And then volume, and then floor area.
These are terrific. Thank you for bringing this up. So I think it would help to note here that that first section, 11.1, 30-8-11.1, speaks to all accessory uses and structures. So not just ADUs, but every garage, every shed, pool house, anything that would count as an accessory structure is subject to those three standards right there. And so we have kind of accepted accessory dwelling units from that 30%, knowing further down in the specific standards for accessory dwelling units that they can only be 50% of the floor area of the home. So this is also a diagnostic that first number one is also used in uses to say, is the principal use of a property commercial, but then you have some sort of office or something, there could also be a combination of uses on a parcel, and that 30% is also used for that calculation.
Well, just trying to do some quick calculations, and between item 1 and item 3, and I think you've answered the question based on building coverage, which would be all the first floor and the second floor as opposed to floor area. Because if you had 2,000 square foot house and the ADU could not exceed 30%, well, if you're talking about square footage, that's 600 square feet.
Correct.
So it's to everyone's advantage to build two-story accessory dwelling units to get bigger units, is what I'm reading here. Yeah, okay, fine, okay. Yeah, probably. Okay, and then on 3, it talks about 50% of the building coverage, and if you had 2,000 square feet of building coverage, then that would allow you to do 1,000 square foot ADU, right?
Potentially.
Well,
But again, you have to go back up to look at what the, if you have any other accessory structures on the property. So if you have a garage or some other detached structures, that those would kind of take away from it. I think one thing that we can also point to is that the permits that we have received, we have some data that shows that that would be quite an outlier for the accessory dwelling units that have been built. So I just offer that as some perspective.
all right, then we get into, I'll switch gears, get off of that because I don't have to worry about enforcing it. So that's up to y'all and your calculators. But lots of times we will have deed restrictions that specifically refer to exterior materials. I'm assuming that an ADU would have to adhere to those same conditions.
Terrific topic. Yes, both with the deed restrictions as well as topic of historic districts. So those would be things that would kind of override the land development ordinance, and they would be subject to those kind of heightened restrictions for a deed restriction, as well as you may have a question about what if somebody wants to build an ADU in a historic district. They would need to go to the Historic Preservation Commission prior to filing that building permit. So this wouldn't give agency to just build ADUs without adhering to those standards as well.
All right, this is
Commissioner Skeens, if I may, just a little bit of added context. A deed restriction, private agreement, something like that. Of course, enforcement isn't going to come from us, from the city, right? So just wanted to add that flourish on top of what Mr. Andrews said.
So I think the answer is yes. Okay.
Yes.
Since I have to help enforce this, I want to make sure this is clear. Private covenants and private restrictions are private matters that when you purchase a property, you get into those things. Those are not enforced by the city of Greensboro. So we will only be enforcing provisions that are in the land development ordinance. Now, Mr. Andrews spoke to if it's in a historic district, for instance, you're in a historic district overlay and subject to those provisions on there. But in terms of the city enforcing any type of deed restrictions, we would not enforce those. That would be up to the homeowners association or other private parties to enforce those.
Mike, zoning conditions are not deed restrictions, but they're conditions.
Yeah,
So
zoning
the
conditions.
conditions say that it has to be 30% brick. Does the accessory dwelling unit have to be 30% brick as well? That's Mary's question, I think.
Okay, because she said deed restrictions, so I misunderstood what the question was.
I used too many words.
Yes.
I'll give you another variable. Let's go to
Thank
zoning.
you for clarifying. Zoning conditions, yes, we would continue to enforce those on the structures on the property.
All right, and then I really want to hear more about, and this is going to be to Andrew. You've removed the occupancy requirement, and you said it was because of enforceability. Now, we've just been through all this business with Airbnbs and specifically stated that if the owner did not reside on site, that he had to have somebody locally for enforcement. So, and by not having any reference to that in this amendment, you've opened up the same can of worms. I mean, what we just talked about was, could he rent both of them out? Yes, they could both be Airbnbs, the primary and the ADU, and there's no conditions for someone being responsible for them if they have a big party. That the ownership, not ownership, the occupancy took care of that problem. So I'm a little disturbed that you've taken the occupancy requirement out. And I heard what you said, that it's enforceability, but...
Yeah. You certainly can raise that question, much like we cannot or staff does not look at who's buying a home every time or a piece of property within the city. This would be kind of in the same vein. If somebody were to desire to use an accessory dwelling unit, or maybe a principal dwelling that has an accessory dwelling unit as a short-term rental, they would be going through that process. So there would still be review if someone's proposing a different land use. Accessory dwelling unit, or I'm sorry, a short-term rental has a separate permitting process. Or I can let Mike speak to the nuts and bolts of that, but that is those are two distinct uses of possibly the same building. You could have a short-term rental, or you could just rent a house out long-term. It would be the same arrangement with an accessory dwelling unit. And again, I'll go back that accessory dwelling units have been allowed in every residential zoning district in the city for at least the early 90s, probably before that as well. So it's helpful to have that context.
Yeah,
but this looks like a way to get around the Airbnb requirements. You know what I mean? So if my fellow commissioner was talking about, we went through this Airbnb requirement that the person had to be on the property. Now, if this happens, right?
Well, just to be clear, under the regulations that are getting ready to go into effect, that standard is not in the short-term rental regulations about an owner being on the property. What it requires is that either the owner or a local operator be identified and be the responsible party for that short-term rental. So I don't know that I don't want to confuse the issue necessarily, but I don't think that's applicable in this conversation. And actually, I think Attorney Ducharme wants to speak to the ownership question as well to help the commission on that. And I also would remind the commission we do have speakers as well we probably should get to.
To piggyback after Mr. Kirkman's comment, which I think spoke very well to the requirement that it will be in the short-term rental regulations, trying to directly control or regulate the ownership runs us into, Mr. Andrews called it enforcement issues. I'll call it deeper legal concerns about potential challenges that could be raised in that event. So we can't regulate ownership in that way.
Chair O'Connor, could I ask?
Ms. Gaines, do you have more? Not now. Not that I'm going to talk about. Okay, let's go down the line and we'll come back. Ms. Glass, did you have any questions? Mr. Gilmer? Mr. Engel? Any questions? Mr. Egbert, any questions? Okay, we'll go back. Ms. Maggot said she had a question.
I just wanted to add two things that are changing and read those. The accessory dwelling shall be affixed to or constructed on a permanent foundation, not to be a manufactured home or a movable structure. So that is the case?
Yes, and so an accessory dwelling unit would be required to be permitted through North Carolina Building Code, not a home on wheels, or you couldn't use an RV. There are different building standards, whether it's many times manufactured homes are manufactured to HUD standards, which are different than
that's what I was thinking about.
Yeah, which are different than state building code. So we just want to make that as clear as possible.
Oh, good. And then the other condition that you didn't mention in your summary was that the ownership of the accessory dwelling unit shall not be transferred apart from its primary dwelling unit.
Certainly. So that would be, let's see here.
That is B on 11.2.
Yeah. So the that is language that many other municipalities also use to kind of reemphasize that these two units have a relationship and that there's a principal structure and an accessory structure, or accessory dwelling unit, and there's not a provision to subdivide those off to different ownership so that those two dwellings would be on the same piece of property.
Okay. And so my question is about the single-family property. You know, that, and my fellow commissioner was asking the same. The single-family property, it would seem to me, should be a part of the definition of where you're placing this. Where else would you place it, you know, besides a single-family property? And why would you eliminate single-family property? I find that a little confusing. I am on F in 11.2.
Certainly. So item F, if the accessory dwelling is proposed for a location on a single-family property, the dwelling must retain a single-family appearance. Is that the item that you're looking at, Commissioner?
Yes.
Okay. So, I mean, the real crux of that previous, or hopefully previous provision is that the challenge in that is that the single-family appearance is maintained from the street. That is a very difficult definition to enforce. What looks like a single-family dwelling is there's a variety of architectural styles, different materials that you could use, and so that's just very difficult to enforce. So that really that whole provision is struck. Now, an ADU is permitted in a number of other zoning districts, but primarily residential. Let's see here. I don't know if Mike has something else.
That's a good point.
We've talked about this before, that what you're presenting this night are the changes to the ordinance. Obviously, there are other provisions that are going to stay the same. The definition of an accessory dwelling unit in our ordinance speaks to it, that it is either part of a principal dwelling or an accessory building and secondary and incidental to the use of the property as single-family residential. So if you have a scenario where you have a dwelling unit that is, say, maybe for an on-site manager, for industrial use, that's considered a caretaker dwelling, and that is a separately defined use and regulated separately from that. So I wanted to be clear with the commission that by definition, an accessory dwelling unit is only associated with a single-family residential use.
Thank you for the clarity there. I appreciate it so much.
Thank you, Mike.
Okay. Do we have any other questions before we do have speakers from the floor here? I had one question. Could you just address the idea of setbacks? Because I don't see that it says the accessory dwelling unit can't be forward of the main structure.
I believe that is in the general standards. I will go ahead and look in the ordinance and have an answer for you. Oh, Mike.
Yeah. It's in the existing text is not changing, so that standard is going to stay the same. So that's why it's not in your text amendment on there.
Thank you. Just needed that clarity. If there are no other questions right now, we'll open this to speakers from the floor, and we certainly can ask additional questions later if commissioners need to. Do we have anyone wishing to speak on this? You be limited to 3 minutes. And if you would give your name and address when you come to the podium, please.
Thank you. My name is Judy Stalder, 115 South Westgate Drive here in High Point. I'm here, Greensboro, sorry. I'm here representing Trebic and their members. You are aware that there is a need for more housing in Greensboro, especially with our recent economic development successes. And certainly ADUs will not solve all our housing needs, but they are part of the solution. And Trebic is here tonight just to commend the staff on working with stakeholders to update this ordinance and to make it just a little bit easier to build ADUs in Greensboro. Thank you.
Thank you. If you'd give your name and address, please.
Good evening, Commission members. My name is Dan Curry. I live at 1311 Oak Street here in Greensboro, 27403. Here today in support of the text amendment. I currently serve as the Advocacy and Community Engagement Committee Chair of the Greensboro Housing Coalition and as a volunteer member of the Executive Council of the AARP North Carolina. So you may know that AARP is the largest nonprofit membership organization in the U.S. AARP has taken a very strong and proactive stance in supporting the development of accessory dwelling units to provide one method of housing our rapidly expanding older population. By the year 2050, the number of Americans ages 65 and older is projected to increase by 58 million from 58 million in 2022 to 82 million. That's almost a 50% increase in this age group. Where will they live? How will communities such as Greensboro provide safe and decent housing for such a huge increase in the number of older adults? Certainly, ADUs are not the only answer, but with federal government assistance for housing development serving seniors at historically low levels, and the cost of housing escalating much faster than the growth in wages or Social Security benefits, it's no surprise that the number of homeless and precariously housed seniors is exploding in our community and across the country. Staff has presented you today with a well-thought-out set of revisions for our existing regulations that allow ADUs to be built in all of our residential zoning districts. As you probably have heard, these adjustments follow national trends, make it easier and more likely that some of our homeowners may decide to add a dwelling unit to their property for several reasons. Those reasons could include housing an extended family member, caregivers, which is a huge need in our community, or providing long-term wealth-building opportunities. With vast areas of our community dedicated to one house on one lot, these revisions are one efficient way to encourage the development of additional housing units in our community. This is one small step, and I ask for your support of these revisions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening.
Good evening.
My name is David Wharton. I live at 667 Percy Street in Greensboro. I was a member of the advisory committee in the drafting of this ordinance. I'm also the president of the Dunleith Neighborhood Association. If you don't know Dunleith, we sit kind of on the northeast corner, just outside of downtown. We were a single-family residential suburb about 1910. Over the 20th century, sort of evolved into a mixture of single-family, multi-family, office, commercial, institutional. We like it. So we've already sort of experienced that general density, and people there are pretty happy with it. Our neighborhood board of directors unanimously voted to support this text amendment. The board is made up of both young people and older people like me. Some are homeowners, some are renters, and one is a small developer. So they were all in favor of it. Personally, I like this because it increases people's economic freedom to do what they wish with their property, especially small stakeholders. I see it as helpful to folks who live in neighborhoods that have been traditionally denied access to capital as a way to build up wealth in their property. Flexibility in the use of the property. A friend of mine is an architect, and he has been asked to design a number of these. He said a lot of them are older folks like me who want to build an ADU to move into so that their children and grandchildren can move into the larger structure. So I like that flexibility. I also like the fact that it's a very efficient land use. People build these things, their property will become more valuable, their wealth will increase, the tax base will increase without the city having to build more public infrastructure to support them. You don't have to build streets or sewers out to them, so I think that's fiscally a good move for the city. And I also like the fact that it meets the comprehensive plan's goals and the city's goal of increasing housing options in the city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is William Furlow. I live at 1801 Brassfield Road, Unit C, and I'm also a member of the Affordable Housing Working Group at Holy Trinity Episcopal Church. I'm happy to be speaking last because I endorse everything that the previous speakers have already said. There's a funny TV commercial that I'm sure many of you have seen recently where a little girl chooses Charles Barkley to be on her grade schoolyard basketball team. And the punchline is, it's the easiest decision in the history of decisions. I think this is that kind of decision. The city has said that affordable housing is a top priority and that gentle infill is a way to get there. Mr. Andrews used the term that it's infill that's almost imperceptible, which it would appear to be. As was said a minute ago, this is a small piece of the solution. But to make a significant impact in the housing crisis that we have, we're going to need a lot of little pieces to reach that solution. This process allows homeowners to help finance the addition of housing stock in the city. The homeowner who's going to benefit from having the ADU spends his or her money on property that they already own to build a residence. So it is a win-win. No one has made too much out of parking, but I know that has been sometimes questioned. And but I think it's not really an issue because these things, no one envisions an explosion of ADUs all across the city. And there would be one here, one there, one there. But and no residential street has the same mixture of vehicles day to day or night to night. Visitors come and go, service people come and go, caregivers come and go. Parking is not going to be a big issue. If we're serious about adding to the stock of affordable housing, we need to have a bias towards saying yes to some of these things and not no. So I would encourage you to approve these well thought out amendments. It's the easiest decision in the history of decisions. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other speakers from the floor or online?
Chair Connor, we have no speakers online.
Thank you. If there's no further comment, we can close the public hearing, and we can see if the commissioners have any further comments or questions.
I'm just available if you have any questions. Sorry.
Thank you. Would you please come to the podium? If you'd identify yourself with your name and address, please.
Yeah, my name is Scott Allen. I'm at 2801 Grasmere Drive. I just have a question in regards to, and again, I heard some of this online, and I heard just a little bit as I walked in. I know there are restrictions as far as the ADU having to be set back a certain amount from the primary residence. The question I have is in regards to a flag lot, where it's a long driveway that sets it way back off of the street. How is it determined what is the front of the lot, what is the back of the lot, and what would be the requirements as far as the ADU being in front or behind of the main dwelling unit? Does that make sense? Because there's no real definition of, well, where's the front of my lot, where's the back of my lot?
Thank you. Mr. Kirkman, I believe that you had a comment previously on flag lots.
Chris
Or
Andrews.
Yes.
Chris Andrews with the planning department. Flag lots are generally not permitted within the development ordinance. if there's a specific scenario, I mean, staff would be happy to discuss with the speaker and work that out. Be happy to answer any questions for them.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Seeing no further comment, we will close the public hearing. Is there further comment or questions from commission members? Mr. Downing?
Yes, Warshay Downing. I was just echoing the fact, I love the aspect, the idea that it's gentle density. All of my questions previously were answered. I had a bit concerned about the single family appearance no longer being a standard. So that was my biggest concern, but all of the individuals who spoke, I like the support of it, and I do agree with this possibly being passed, there's going to be some additional policy changes that we will have to consider as this continues to grow, because we want to make sure that ADUs are of great standard and that we're not promoting slum conditions either, because there are cases where some individuals feel they can do whatever on their property and not maintain a standard. So I love the fact the speaker spoke about support of the elderly, so they can have that mobility and the ability to live with family members or whatever the case may be in those ADUs. But I do want to emphasize the policy that will likely have to change moving forward to support the growing ADUs as the housing crisis is imminent and it continues. That's all I want to say.
Thank you, Mr. Downing. Mr. Gilmer?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chairman. I will be supporting it. I think, as probably a lot of you know, that I am been around a long time, and I believe in affordable housing. And I know it's a great need in the community, and I serve on committees where we talk about increasing the housing stock. And so I will be supporting it. I think it's something new for Greensboro, and I think we need to look to the future. And I'm a senior citizen myself, so I appreciate any kind of help that we can give to the other citizens in Greensboro. I think it's a great idea, and its time is here, and we need to move on. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from commissioners? Mr. Engel or Mr. Egbert? Seeing none, we will be looking for a motion, and we don't have any proposed text for that, but we're looking for a motion to approve the proposed language for the ordinance amending the Greensboro Code of Ordinances with respect to zoning, planning, and development for accessory dwelling units. Okay, Ms. Gaines?
Oh, okay.
I'm going to just let attorneys point one thing real quick.
I would just say, in the context of making the motion, given what the general statutes say about consistency statements, plan consistency statements, I would encourage that we indicate that we believe the amendment would be consistent with the comprehensive plan. If you wish to state specifics beyond that, feel free.
You want to make reference to the comprehensive plan?
Yes, ma'am.
GSO 2040 comprehensive plan and considers its action to be reasonable and in the public interest.
Second, Warshay Downing. Oh, Warshay Downing.
Thank you, Ms. Gaines and Mr. Downing. We will take a vote on that. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Is anyone opposed? This constitutes a favorable recommendation and is subject to a hearing at the Tuesday, April 16th, 2024 City Council meeting. Thank you very much. Very appreciative of this and the staff's dedicated work on this. The next item on our agenda is an update for us on the Greensboro 2040 Comprehensive Plan.
And Chair O'Connor, Commissioner Engel is going to have to leave the meeting.
Thank you.
Good afternoon, Commissioners, and thank you very much for having us here this evening. My name is Russ Clegg. I work in the Planning Department, and I manage the Long Range Planning Division. And I'm joined tonight by Dana Kluke, who is a senior planner in our division. And we're going to give you just a brief overview of our annual update to our comprehensive plan. We put out quarterly implementation updates that highlight the work that different departments are doing that move us forward towards our goals and objectives in the plan. And then we do annual reviews every year that kind of summarize those and look at some of the land use trends that we're seeing. The plan was adopted in June of 2020, and it was effective back in September of 2020. So in this one, we took a look back at the 3.5 years that the plan has been around just to get a good overview. We shifted to doing those reviews at the beginning of each year just to kind of coincide with some of the other data research that we do. So I'm going to kind of walk through at a high level what's in the annual report and point out a few points of interest. We'll point out there on the first page, as it says, we did win a couple of national award and a state award with the plan. And the reason I bring this up, I think it is a reflection of the quality of thought and input that we got from the public. There are really strong ideas that drive this plan forward that are a direct reflection of that input. And in particular, there was an emphasis from our advisory committee, which was composed of board and commission members, that we use language that was accessible and strong and really usable by everyday folks and not boring. That sometimes we could be a little boring, but they wanted us to make sure that this was good language that people could pay attention to and really grab onto. We hope that it is important and useful in zoning decisions that you all make. I won't go through all the different project highlights in the plan. In this update, we tried to get a couple from each of the big ideas and highlight those. There are a few I'll point to just because I think they'll have a big impact on land use decisions going forward. Clearly, the big job announcements that we've had in a couple of years, if you look at Toyota, you look at the stuff out at the airport, that's going to have a big impact on the way Greensboro grows, and we'll need to be very intentional about how we grow with those new businesses and people coming to Greensboro. Items like the Battleground Park District, which is a really unique feature in Greensboro. Our 10-year housing plan to address a lot of the housing issues that we are having in Greensboro and the housing shortage that we're seeing. The emphasis on equity and growth across Greensboro that's reflected in the National Register District in East Greensboro, I think is a very important piece to point out, as is our missing middle housing. We touched on that earlier, but that's been a real strong part of trying to implement the plan. So we've adopted 2 small area plans since the comprehensive plan was adopted. These will help bring the comprehensive plan to life with more detailed studied and recommendations that are based on the specifics that make those areas unique and interesting. The recommendations in those plans are housed in the framework of the comprehensive plan, so those recommendations are objective statements within the big ideas and goals of the plan. They can be used as advocacy tools for the community to keep them focused and on the same page and understanding how they can advocate for change in their community. We use them for capital planning to understand where we can invest money and to help keep our decision makers focused on the plans that we create. And we also hope that they're a guide in land use decisions for the Planning and Zoning Commission, but City Council as well. Eastgate City Boulevard was the first plan that we worked on. We focused on that because of a few things. One, the importance of Gate City Boulevard as a front door to the community. A lot of people come into town to Greensboro on Gate City Boulevard. It connects the highways to some of our major institutions. Eastgate City Boulevard in particular goes through several communities that have been traditionally underserved, but we're seeing a lot of investment there with things happening downtown, with the new investments we'll see in Windsor, NOCO Recreation Center, and the investments we're seeing at Gateway Research Park and Barber Park and the Y. It's a really important corridor, so we wanted to make sure that we looked at that as a way to leverage our city investments. So we looked at the importance of transportation options, making sure people can get to these facilities. We looked at the types of land uses and where we wanted to see them, how we wanted to have activity centers along that corridor. And we also looked at the ways we could strengthen neighborhoods, so to make sure people living there got the benefits from these investments and that we didn't have displacement and other issues in those neighborhoods. We looked at Fleming Road due to the amount of growth we've seen in corridors near there. If you look at New Garden Road, you look at Horse Spring Creek Road, you look at the growth we're anticipating at the airport, we thought it made sense to try to get ahead of that growth curve on Fleming Road and really see what challenges they might face and what the residents in the area were concerned about, and put some recommendations in place to help maintain that quality of life in that area when new growth occurs and where that growth might best be situated. So looking forward, we do have some upcoming small area plans. We're getting ready to launch phase 2 of the Randleman Road plan. We adopted phase 1 back in 2016. This, in the gold, you'll see Randleman Road highlighted on this map. We're studying a section from I-40 down to I-85. We do have a web page set up on our website. If you go to the city site and hit / Randleman Road, it'll take you to a splash page. We have our existing conditions report there. We'll put other information up as we develop it, other meeting announcements. Our first meeting is this Thursday. We're at New Goshen Church. We hope everybody can come out. It's from 5 to 7. It'll be a drop-in. We'll have several other departments there with us and hope to have a good start to a community conversation about what we really see as the future of how we can modernize Randleman Road and revitalize that strip. The other one we'll be starting very soon is in the purple area, which is the South Greensboro plan. We are right now selecting consultants to help us with that. We have a group of residents helping us do our final phase of interviews with consultants this week. That's an area about 8 square miles in size. A lot of different land uses there, pretty much the full range of transportation options there, from highways to local streets to trails, lots of parks, lots of neighborhoods. So it's a very complex area. That process is going to take a while. We hope the Randleman Road project will be wrapped up this fall, hopefully by September, but this will be a little bit more in-depth study. So we'll make sure those two coordinate well together. So I'm going to now turn the presentation over to Dana Kluge, who's going to walk through a couple of the maps that are in the report that you have. Thank you.
Thank you, Russ. Thank you, Commissioner members, for having me. My name is Dana Kluge with the Long Range Division of the Planning Department. As part of the annual review, we look at rezoning and annexation cases on a spatial level to see if there are any development patterns that we need to be looking for. And we mapped each rezoning and annexation case from October of 2020 to the end of 2023. What you'll see on the map is a circle representing the size and acreage of each case, and also the zoning requested by color. One of the things that stands out in this map is the large number of purple or industrial cases that were requested specifically at the periphery of the city. We're seeing a lot of cases on the eastern and the western edge of the city near I-40, I-85, near the 840 loop. And of the 4,500 acres that were rezoned in the last approximate 3 years, 34% of the land was rezoned to an industrial use. This signifies that Greensboro is still a gate city, with the logistics playing an important role in our development pattern. We also see a high number of orange or multifamily residential projects spread across the city. Nearly 1,000 acres, or 20% of the land area rezoned in this time period, was for multifamily residential purposes. Speaking of residential uses, we also looked at the potential housing units that were approved through the rezoning and annexation cases. So the map here indicates the type of residential use, whether it be single or multifamily use or a mix of the two, and the number of units that were approved by these processes. I want to clarify that these are cases that were just approved through the rezoning or annexation processes. There are also by right subdivision approvals that would allow for residential uses that are not included in this figure. But over the last 3 calendar years, through the rezoning and annexation process, there have been almost 16,000 housing units approved. We know that there will be more housing units that come online because of the by right approvals that are developed on parcels where there are already appropriate zonings. So in this map, you can see that the majority of residential projects approved were multifamily housing units. In fact, over 68% of the potential housing units that were approved were part of multifamily projects. 19% of the potential units were mixed residential, meaning that the projects have both single and multifamily housing components, and 12% were single family. In addition to the data that you've heard tonight and that's in this report, we have several reports that are on our website at www.greensboro-nc.gov/statistics. And we encourage you to look through those so that you can learn more about the growth and development of the city. So with that, we can, Russ and I can answer any questions that you might have, and just wanted to highlight the Randleman Road open house meeting that Russ mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Do we have any comments or questions from commissioners? I'm very excited about this plan, its flexibility, and the notoriety that it's already achieved. And to see its implementation in our monthly meetings, I think, is very affirming. So congratulations and thank you. Do we have any additional items from the planning department?
We do not have any additional items for the commission tonight.
Do we have anything else from any of the commission members?
Fortunately, not that bad. I think we said 3.
We have 3 cases for next month, but I'm very confident that we'll have a normal workload in April, so, or in May.
More than 6. How about that?
Yeah, and we understand that Mr. Engel has left the meeting, but we welcome his newest family member and appreciate his joining us this evening as he was able. So congratulations to both Mr. and Mrs. Engel. Thank you. Any further comments? If not, I'll take a motion to adjourn. So, thank you. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you.